So today we've got a very different PC that we're building here because we've got this Sakura Waifu Edition graphics card where we got this on AliExpress, and I was really surprised because it was on the sales and I managed to get it cheaper than the cheapest RTX 5070 that I could get in Australia. Now this GPU, it's just got actually a decent looking sized cooler on it, so I'm hoping it performs really well when we do the benchmarks. Besides all the fancy, anime girlfriend stuff, I'm not really into that. I mean, me personally, some people love that kind of thing. But again, I'm always into value when it comes to PC parts, and it being the cheapest RTX 5070 at the time, I was thinking, well, we might as well try and piece together a whole AliExpress gaming PC. Now, this is what I've said in the past with AliExpress sales. You can really take advantage of them and build something cheap. For instance, this whole build here is going to feature a B650 motherboard, Ryzen 7 7700, Snowman cooler, and it's going to have this Waifu GPU, as well as a really good power supply from Thermalright, an 850 watt gold rated SFX power supply. Now all this came a little over 1,700 Aussie dollars when the sales are on, and in USD it's about 1,150 USD, which makes it so that in Australia in particular, this is a really competitively priced gaming PC with the specs that we've got here. Now, if you were to buy this at this point in time, from my calculations, you're gonna be spending an extra 300 or so Aussie dollars, or about 200 USD more, just because it's not sale time. So that makes it so that the sales on AliExpress are really powerful. Anyhow, let's start building up this very different, not just with the graphics card, the Sakura Waifu, but also with the case itself. We're going with an Metal Fish open frame ITX case. Now I've used this before and it's meant to be built a particular way, but I've done things in a different way, which actually also saves you money. But in my opinion, it just gives out more consistent, reliable performance, especially with the motherboard that we're using here today. And with that aside, we've also got today's video sponsor to get, once this is all set up and hopefully we have no problems, we can get Windows activated for extremely cheap. But more on that later. Let's start building up this beast of a waifu. So I'm going to be straight up with you guys. I'm really nervous because this is going to be my first time meeting my new waifu. Let's see if she greets me with a no problems boot and a perfect install. All right, so cutting the crap here, I'm actually really shocked that this build turned out even better than my previous open frame mini ITX build. And the reason for that is because this time around I just used these included brackets that were meant for the end of the case, and I used them as a GPU support bracket. And that way we've now got a fully portable build that, although it's fragile, it is still really small and really portable. And the best thing is we do not need a PCIe riser cable here. So I'm over the moon, or should I say over the Sailor Moon, with this build and how it's come out so far. It's also really quiet. The noise, maybe you guys can not hear it or hear it. And yeah, like, wow, guys, I think this is really kick-ass for the fact that it's not only one of the cheapest RTX 5070 PCs that we can put together, but it's also one of the best. Like, this thing looks pretty neat, and it's also got that mini ITX form factor to boot with also pretty good components, I'm hoping. Anyhow, we'll test out the temperatures very soon, as well as some gaming benchmarks, and compare that to a 9800X 3D setup with an RTX 5070. However, first thing is first here, we are going to go into the BIOS and just tune up the memory, because it's some cheap puskill memory from AliExpress. Like, I know you might be laughing, like, that's what it's called. It's called puskill. Now, I'm hoping that the memory, although the name says poo, I'm hoping the value is the actual opposite here, and it ends up being pretty good to the point where we can tune it to say 5600 megahertz, even though it's 4800 megahertz. If we can tune this stuff to 5600 megahertz like I've done in the past previously, then it should make for some decent memory. However, let's quickly get onto that right now, and then also test out some of the other first time components. For instance, the SSD, that's the first time I've used this random move speed brand. And yeah, hopefully everything works perfectly. So now it's time to install Windows, and for this we are going with a Windows 11 Enterprise LTSC. Now, this is where today's video sponsor comes into play, because we can get this motherboard on this system activated with a forever OEM single end user key license from VIP SCD keys. Now, how we do this is we go for the link below, just click on that. And if you want to get Windows 10 LTSC or Windows 11 Home or Windows 11 Pro, then they've got pretty much all the versions of Windows 10 and 11 available at really good prices. And the best thing is, if you use the coupon code TYC, you can get a discount of around 30%. And it makes it so it's just a really inexpensive purchase to get Windows activated on your system. And the best thing is about the Windows 11, especially the LTSC enterprise versions, is that they come without any bloat included. And so a lot of people ask me, how are your 0.1% lows so good? That's essentially, how's your PC not stuttering when you're playing games? And this is the biggest element of that. I mean, there is the tune and everything else that we're doing here, but the main thing is to start off with a Windows, in my opinion, that's got the least amount of crap in it to boot. And so the Windows 11 and also the 10, the enterprise copies, whether you're going with LTSC or LTSC IoT, the IoTs generally are even more slightly cut down than the non-IoT versions, and they're also just locked into that update only. They won't get any additional feature updates. So in my opinion, if you've got a PC that you know is working flawlessly, you don't want Microsoft to introduce any problems in the future, go with the IoT version. It's what I do personally. However, that said, I'll put some links in the description below where you can get activated and also where you can make an install for these enterprise versions. Now, me personally, I usually recommend for people who are more focused on gaming to go with Windows 11 Enterprise. But if you're more focused like me on work and the work side of things, I'd then go with Windows 10 Enterprise IoT in particular, because it's got that extended support. Anyhow, I'll put all the links in the description below. Let's get back to the video. So we're fast forwarding now 3 hours later with a really bizarre update that I just got done installing Windows. I was just about to install drivers, games, get onto benchmarking, and then I had this problem where the GPU was giving out a code 43 error. In other words, it wasn't working properly, and then the whole PC just wouldn't boot up properly sometimes. And I was thinking, whoa, do I have a faulty PC part on my hands? And or did my waifu cheat on me already? And so what I did was I then tried installing Windows 10. That didn't work, same errors popped up. I just tried dialing back the default settings just in case maybe my RAM OC was a bit too aggressive on this budget memory. Perhaps that corrupted an install or something like that. And nope, that wasn't the issue either. Tried dropping the PCIe down to X8 lanes. Maybe the motherboard was faulty. Tried a single stick of RAM. Nope, that didn't work. Just took the SSD out when I was having these booting issues. Tried a different SSD. That didn't work. Went through the whole list until we just got back to the motherboard itself, where that was the only part that it could have been. And so here's where I then went to the motherboard manufacturer's website, Jingyu, and sure enough, they had a BIOS update there, which was also separated into two different BIOSes for the same motherboard, which they then had the code reading to get the BIOS update, which my code, I just had to guess that it was manufactured before the month that they didn't even state with the year. So very confusing, but anyway, the BIOS that I downloaded was the right one of the two, updated it, and it said in the notes that it fixes RTX 5000 series and RX 9000 series issues. Well, I wouldn't call it an issue here, Jingyu. I'd call it a major problem where your graphics card just flat out won't work properly at all in Windows. That's not just an issue, that's a major problem. So yeah, we got that fixed after the BIOS update. Everything's working fine now. The whole system's tuned. We're running Firmark finally just to test out the temperatures on the waifu, because initially I thought, oh, did I get a faulty GPU? Like, really, this is like the worst thing that could happen, because the GPU obviously being the most expensive part of the build. But sure enough, I then, in this 3 hours, I was productive too. I then put this on the other test rig and I started doing benchmarks for the comparison that's coming up very soon. And so the GPU I knew was absolutely fine when I was doing that. But it still makes you wonder that these problems just shouldn't be happening, or there should be big notes in the listings when they sell this stuff. I guess that's one of the problems that still exists on AliExpress, is when they've got this lack of communication that exists, because I've never seen a BIOS update fix a just flat out driver install giving out problems with a graphics card. Usually when a graphics card doesn't work with the BIOS on a motherboard, it just doesn't flat out boot, and it won't give out a signal, period, even to the BIOS screen. So very surprised to see that the BIOS did fix that. It was actually the last thing I would have thought of, but sure enough, BIOS update, and now our system is working absolutely fine. Sorry, I should be a bit more excited, but I'm just a bit frustrated because to update the BIOS too, there's no option in the BIOS. You have to download their BIOS and then make a flash 32 USB, whether it's an existing drive or a new drive. It can't be NTFS, for example, and then you just boot off that in from the BIOS, and then it'll do the rest. It'll update your BIOS. Anyhow, just a little update and FYI with this motherboard. I'm gonna go back to my review and put some big bold notes in the description there, as well as update the pinned comment, because I gave this motherboard a rave review, but this can definitely give a lot of people headaches when they first go to build their system, especially if they're building like an enclosed mini ITX system and they're thinking they're gonna have to pull out the motherboard and other parts when it's just a BIOS update. So that was definitely an unpleasant surprise from my newfound waifu. But actually, it wasn't the waifu, guys. It was the night devil. Should have known all along that it was the devil. Here, fishy, 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 fishy. So we now just finished up benchmarking our PC, the AliExpress Waifu Special, and it is giving out some really good performance, even with the budget DDR5 memory, because the RTX 5070, it's a mid-range card. It's not going to be anywhere near the likes of a 5090 or even an RX 9070 XT is going to bring out more of a difference, I feel, between a 7700 and a 9800 X3D. But let's go over these results, because we tested here 1440p and 4K just at high settings. And I guess the biggest difference I saw here was Counter-Strike 2 at 1440p high settings, where we got here 385 average FPS versus 403. And then the 0.1% lows on the 7700 were still really impressive, right up there trailing that of the 9800X 3D. So lost by about 16 there, but still well above 120. Great level to be at if you're playing competitively and you like, say, 1440p native resolution and some bit of bling to go with it. Anyhow, stepping up to 4K, here's where we got identical results between these two setups. In fact, I think it was 0.1% low was 1 FPS difference, which would come down to variance, but nothing to sweat and really no difference at 4K. Though moving on to Marvel Rivals, here's where we got identical results at 1440p, and then we also got identical results at 4K. Now keep in mind, the max FPS that we saw here was 102 average FPS at 1440p high settings native with TAAU enabled, that's the anti-aliasing, but still, it's great to see that if you're playing Marvel Rivals at 1440p, for instance, you're not going to be missing out on anything going with this budget 7700 outfit with the RTX 5070. Now the final game we've got here is Fortnite. I do like to play this, and with at least over 120 average FPS, it is pretty competitive, especially in these battle royale games. And here's where at 1440p at least, we've got here high settings across the board, and we've got, just in our test section, we've got 166 versus 165 average FPS. So 1 FPS difference, and the 0.1% lows were 5 higher on the 9800X 3D, making it so that there's really no difference here if you want to get a nice smooth experience out of either of these setups. And then going up to 4K, we saw identical results. So no difference here at 4K, high settings on Fortnite. Then we'll quickly go over some of the other parts that we haven't touched on yet, and that would be, first of all, the SSD. I checked the bypass IO compatibility, and sure enough, it's there. And the results here actually speak great lengths to this SSD working with direct IO storage, which is exclusive to Windows 11, but you can check this in the command prompt by just showing this, typing in this command that I'll put up on the screen for you, and that'll tell you if your NVMe drive can support it. Now, it will give you some extra FPS, especially when the GPU is going near 100% utilization, and especially at 4K, for instance. So it is good to have an SSD with, I guess, a bit more storage free as well to take full advantage of it. So this move speed SSD ended up being a component that is essentially good value, didn't add to any stuttering in the build. Then we've got the Snowman. That's just a staple item. We've got a comparison coming up very soon, actually, comparing this air cooler to some thermal ride options. But this is one of the only good air coolers that I keep going back to on AliExpress. This is the 6 heat pipe version, and for the price, you cannot go wrong. The noise is really low, and the max temperatures I saw, I did run some Cinebench tests, it was going up to the 70s, and also I think in Counter-Strike at one particular moment in the 1440p benchmark, we did go to the 70s, but most of the time it was remaining under 70 degrees in pretty much all these gaming benchmarks, which is great to see, especially with a CPU on AM5. Anyhow, guys, with all that aside, we've got today's build, a special one, because it just hits the mark in terms of compact size, portability, and then the noise is low, the temperatures are good, and the performance is great, but then the value for money is just really good. So incredibly impressed that this PC was one of the first all AliExpress PCs that I built that's actually just a real sort of special PC, in that it can contend with some of the mid-range and higher end options being sold here, but at much better price point. But also on that note, being a really compact mini ITX build, which you usually do pay a premium for. But I guess the only downside with today's build, the biggest downside would be the open air style case, which I guess it wouldn't be for all people. I mean, if you've got pets, for instance, you got a cat going over this thing, it could maybe short circuit something. Or maybe if you've got another pet like a dog and it starts drooling on an open air case, that'd be a disaster. Or not to mention a toddler or something like that. So it's definitely not for everyone, but all the other components, if you can get them and then fit them in an enclosed case that you can get somewhere else, or even off AliExpress, you'd just be paying a lot more money, then by all means you can go do that. I'll put all the links for the parts that I got in today's video in the description below. But do keep in mind, one thing that I will stress before I get on out of here is that I took advantage of getting this PC built for so cheap on the AliExpress sales. So when they do come up, I usually incorporate a sponsor spot into a video. And I'll start posting up on Twitter and community notes so you guys can take advantage of those sales. Because as we saw here, we saved over 300 Australian dollars, about 200 USD, with this build, and that's a lot of money when you even do it in percentage terms. You're saving nearly, I think it's around 15% off your total build cost just by taking advantage of the sales at the right time. And all the components, they ended up actually checking out. Except the motherboard, that was a bit finicky. It ended up being one of those things where we got there in the end, but it can definitely cause a lot of headaches, especially if it's your first time building a PC. So yeah, I'd like to see Jingyu, and at least the resellers of Jingyu, update the BIOS before sending these things out, especially if you're going to be coupling it with an RTX 5000 series card or an RX 9000 series card. Also, lastly, as much of a meme as this Yeston Sakura Waifu Edition card is, it actually ended up being a really decent looking card, and the temperatures and the performance were really good. So in this configuration, it's actually really cool for me personally because I don't see any of that sort of waifu stuff. It's just actually a simple looking card in the build, and the RGB lighting is actually pretty elegant too. Really not invasive, just really subtle. So build ended up checking out. And with all that aside, guys, do let us know in the comment section below what you think of this ALL Aliexpress banger right here. Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always, but in this case, in the end, I actually wouldn't change anything with this build. It ended up just being one complete unit that I'm really happy with, especially in terms of value for money. Anyhow, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. And with that aside, I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.